Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts. My name is Danielle Roberge, and I'm Cultural Programming Officer. It's a real pleasure and honor to present you today my ex-teacher of art history, my ex-colleague at l'Université de Montréal, and my best-ever lecturer, François-Marc Gagnon. He's a teacher, researcher, writer, lecturer, and a tireless promoter of Canada and Quebec's visual heritage. He taught at l'Université de Montréal for 35 years until he retired in 2000. And since that, he's the director and chair of the Gail and Stephen A. Jaroslawski Institute for Studies in Canadian Art at Concordia University. The museum thanks the Institute for its collaboration on the presentation of this program. A prolific researcher, our guest has written several books, such as his Paul-Émile Bordua, for which he received the Governor's General Award in '78. Internationally recognized as an outstanding scholar in Canadian visual culture, François-Marc Gagnon was named to the Order of Canada in 1999. Last year, he has been awarded the 2010 Prix Gérard Morisset as part of the Prix du Québec, and he has just published a study entitled Jean Berger, Complice, Peintre ou Complice. François-Marc Gagnon, we are very pleased, happy to welcome you back. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome François-Marc Gagnon.
Well, the series of lectures that we present today are a little bit special because on one hand, I'm supposed to address the general public, and on the other hand, I'm supposed to address also our students in Concordia in art history. So I will do, this is a kind of very habitually not good situation because you miss both. you try to be in between and you miss both people. Now I want to welcome you here, people from Concordia. As you know, it will be, my contribution will be a little bit thin. As such, it will not make a complete course since I will give 4 lectures here at the museum. But you have the chance to have somebody who will complete very well what I'm presenting to you. It's Dr. Denis Longchamp. Maybe some of you have met him already. It's an old friend of mine. I know that he's good, that he's an excellent instructor. So I feel confident that whatever I will not say, he can complete and he can add to what I will present to you. Denis, maybe you should stand up for the people who have not met him to be able to recognize him when it will be the time. Okay, so let's begin. The subject that I propose this year is, I put it in big letters, the limits of painting, or if you want, some challenges for painter that seems to create a kind of border beyond which painting or even sculpture or photography cannot go. But of course, painters have always been a little bit tempted to go beyond these borders. And so the problem will be how they did it. What is exactly the solution to each of these problems? I thought today of speaking of speech, for instance. How do you represent speech in painting? How do you suggest that there is somebody who speaks or have a message and things like that? How is it done? The same with movement, for instance. By definition, painting is static, doesn't move, but you could suggest movement in a painting, or duration, or finally, emotion also. All these themes in which you have always a kind of limit that have to be crossover if you want to succeed to express them. And I want to do that, I would say, I would try to put it in general context first, And then after, most of my example, if you want, or the theme that I will treat will be from Canadian painting. So that way we will have rather a Canadian art accent in this series of lectures. The first thing, it's an old, very old pretension of painting to be able to paint everything. See? For instance, already Plato was making fun of that, saying that this is a kind of illusion of painters to be able to master everything. And you have that in a famous dialogue, it's called The Republic, in which, of course, the big issue it is, should we have painters in the Republic, in the new city that Plato was imagining? And his answer was no. These people are treating illusory things, and we want truth. We want somebody who will be able to tell the truth and not simply illusion. And I just read you a little passage of this. So it's a dialogue. So Socrates answer people. And so they ask, who is he, the painter? So, which kind of people it is? And Socrates answer, one who is the maker of all the works of all other workers. He can make what any other worker can do also. And so he says, what an extraordinary man. He says, wait a little, and there will be more reason for you saying so. For this is he who is able to make not only vessels of every kind, but plants and animals, himself, and all other things, the earth, the heaven, and the things which are in heaven or under the earth, he makes the gods even. So meaning that the kind of hubris, if you want, of the painter is without limit. He seems to be able to do anything he wants. And in another dialogue, Plato suggests that he could fool like this, maybe not adult people, but young children, by showing them his painting from far, and they will think that it's the real thing, it's in front of them. But of course, when Plato speaks of that, he's very negative about it. He says this is to cultivate illusion. If you can make everything that is already there, it is because you create just the appearance of things, and you don't create them for real, especially when you mention yourself and gods and things like that. But you can give the illusion of that. Even if Plato have said it long time ago, it's 5th century before Christ, you have a tradition among painters, and especially at the Renaissance, and I'm thinking of Leonardo da Vinci, saying exactly that we can do whatever we want. You have a famous text of the Paragone, meaning something like example, written by Leonardo, in which he says exactly that. If you can do whatever you want. He says, if the painter wants to see fair woman to kindle his love, he has this power to create them. Well, this is it. If you are really lonely, that could be a good solution. And if he desired to see monstrosity, something that doesn't exist really in the real world, to accurse his fear, his amusement and laughter, and even his compassion, he is their Lord and Creator. He used a very strong word. The artist could create whatever crosses his fancy, or he says beautiful word. And he says, in fact, whatever exists in the universe, either potentially or actually or in imagination, so you have real things, but also things that you can just imagine, he has it first is in mind and then in his hands, and these images are of such excellence that they present the same proportion harmony to a single glance as belongs to the things themselves. The insistence here on the single glance, it is to distinguish them from people who write. The writer, you cannot, of course, get to the content of the book without some time. But in a painting, you should be able right away to see the subject matter and to see that anything can be represented that way. So you see that, and especially one of the issues of Leonardo was the landscape. One of the things that the painter could do, it was to represent the environment in which we live. And they have a famous discussion about that with, well, I show you just an example of a landscape by Leonardo da Vinci, Santa Maria della Neve. It's kind of a sketch. It never been turned in a painting, but give an idea of what he meant by the painter have the possibility even to paint what is around us, an environment. And there is a famous dialogue with him and Botticelli, in which Botticelli mocked at this pretension of making landscape and all that by saying, landscape is the easiest thing to do. You just take a sponge and you throw it on the canvas, and with all the paint, the drip and all that, you will have a kind of landscape. Huh? And Leonardo says, yeah, maybe, but he says Botticelli is known for having been a very bad landscape painter. And in fact, the landscape in Botticelli is not very important. It's always a background done, you could say, a little bit rapidly. But what is interesting for him, of course, is the human figure that you see on the foreground. This painter make very bad painting. The allusion of this story of the sponge, it's an old story also. You have it in the antiquity. It's attributed to many painters painting different subjects, but always with the same theme. For instance, Protogene, I guess, or Genès, maybe in English, I don't know, Protogène in French. They have represented a dog with the kind of, say, the froth that comes from his mouth, and meaning he wanted to represent the dog like this, and he tried and all this, and it never worked. So from anger at the end, he threw the sponge on the dog, and of course, miraculously, the froth came out, and it was perfect. And then you see the same story about Apelles, who is another very famous painter of antiquity, except that he wanted to paint a horse like this. So they changed the animal, they changed the painter, but it's always the same idea of that something very spontaneous suddenly solve all your problem of representation. So this is the first thing. So you will say, okay, on one side, this pretension to represent anything, to go beyond any border, is put in question by philosophers of the past, and the painter claim, in the contrary, the possibility to do that. So the first theme will be speech. And I thought to myself, that's the only one who really solved the problem completely, it is the comic strip. I had an example in French with Tintin Milou. I said I should make an effort. My public here is speaking English, so I find this incredible representation. I have no idea what it is, except that you see the solution there is to put the word balloon, in which you write what happened. You know, also, if you want to suggest that you are representing thinking, you have these little circle like this, and then finally your cloud above them, or screaming. It's not used here, but it should be. You will be a shape like this, let's say, with little point. The idea that the comic strip have solved, in fact, this way is not, you don't find it often in painting, and especially because there was a tradition, and I represented here by Lomazzo, who is a theoretician of art at the Renaissance, but also a painter, and it's a self-portrait of him, but he became blind later in life, and who have few works by him, but his treatises, let's say, are famous. And he says, there is a kind of kinship between poetry and painting, except that painting is a mute poetry. And poetry is a speaking painting, making this kind of opposition between. Again, this is a quotation from the past. It's already a poet, a Greek poet called Simonide was saying exactly the same thing. Painting, by essence, is mute. So if it wants to represent speech, it have a problem. It have to find a way to do it. And let's say, it was treated as a subject itself, this kind of muteness of the painting. For instance, in this allegory of painting, in which you see a lady at her easel, let's say, representing in front of her an angel. He has wings in his back, and pointing to the heaven, so meaning having an attitude that you could expect maybe from an orator. Somebody will speak in front of you, and he holds a branch of olive tree, meaning that he is probably preaching peace there, if he preach something. And indeed, at his feet, you see a quiver with arrows and bows, meaning that he's against war in a way and pointed to heaven. And this is the subject matter of the painting of the lady who is represent allegorically, you say, painting. On the bottom, you have these two little angels. One is looking at you, and this habitually in a painting of that period of 17th century or even before is what we call an admonitor. It's a personage in a painting that is addressing to the public who looks at the painting. And habitually, he attracts attention to what is important here. And the funny thing, what he points in the book there, maybe it's hard to see from where you are, but it's Leonardo da Vinci. He points the name of Da Vinci, and the other one, the little one, who is in the middle, is with the compass and all that. He is the little geometer. He is the one who represents, let's say, painting a little bit like a science also. Painting, you have to know anatomy, you have to know perspective and things like that. So you have a mixture of feelings, if you want, emotion, but also of science. And so the two little boys there are there to express a different aspect. But the admonitor looks at you saying, painting is like Leonardo used to say, able to do everything. And this idea of the muteness of painting will be challenged, of course, by many painters. They will try to suggest, in the contrary, that even speech can be expressed. And here you have again a little bit light example of that, but it's an engraving done by Jean-Baptiste Oudry, and it's let's say a representation of an artist, a sculptor, who just finished to make this sculpture that is in front of him, and who represents Jupiter. And why is Jupiter? Because he has this lightning in his hands. Habitually, Jupiter is very often represented like that. And this engraving was an illustration of Les Fables de La Fontaine, in which you have the title of this fable. I tried to translate that in English. It sounds better in French, of course, but anyway. The craftsman expressed so well the character of the idol that people found that nothing was missing to Jupiter except speech. In French, parole et idole rhymes together. Il lui manque que la parole. He's so perfect that, and then he had that the sculptor himself got scared of him, and that's why he made a gesture like that. It's a little bit, of course, silly because he is the author of the sculpture. He should not be scared of his own work. But to exaggerate, let's say that it's so lively, il lui manque la parole. The only thing he missed is speech. And then you have also this engraving representing a symbolization of painting in which, well, she painted another great work of art. It's just a snake on a shield like this. But you notice that she has her mouth covered with a piece of cloth, meaning that she's mute. So painting is a mute device by excellence. So then there will be two sectors in which the necessity to represent speech will come out. And then I will just summarize this a little bit, and then I will give you some Canadian example. The first one is, of course, religious painting. Because in religious painting, you do have, from time to time, to represent people who speak and to suggest what is said. And then also in historical painting, for the same reason, when you want to express some history, you may need to suggest that the king or a nobleman or a general of an army have something to say, or a famous phrase that everybody repeats after and things. And then you see that both in ancient art and in contemporary art, and especially in Canadian art also. If you start with a theme in religion, one of the theme where this necessity of representing speech of a certain way is everything dealing with the Annunciation. Like what you see here is the angel coming in the kind of almost a palace very typical of the Renaissance, in which he says to the Virgin, to the Blessed Virgin Mary there, that she will conceive a son. She asked, she was a rational girl, how can I do that? I'm a virgin, I know no man. Oh, don't worry, God will come above you and everything will be solved wonderfully and all that. And at the end she said, okay, let's do it like the way you said. I summarized this, but what strikes me in the text, if you go back to the gospel and you read, it's only in Luke that you find the theme of the Annunciation. There is absolutely no clues where the things happen, and even the emotion of the Virgin. Imagine you are reading peacefully at your place, and suddenly an angel enters there to tell you that you are pregnant and you are 16 years old. A real mess, I could imagine. And so there's nothing, the only words that they use, and in the gospel, she was taken aback a little bit, bouleversée in French, let's say, or of course, at the time they were reading it in Latin. And so the problem then, it's most of what's happening in the Annunciation theme, it is speech. It is exchange of phrases. So what the Fra Angelico here have done, it is to, I don't know if you succeed to read it, but not to read it, but to see that there is some words coming out from the mouth of the angel and going toward the Virgin, and there are some words also coming from her toward the angel. The words that the Virgin said to the angel are written that way. A little bit from right to left, like in Hebrew, if you want, and upside down. Why? Because it's for God. She said, Ecce ancilla Domini, I'm the servant of God, and of course I will do what he wants from me. And so this is addressed to him, so it's upside down, and maybe also gods must know Hebrew, I guess, and they write from right to left. And so here is a kind of a solution, let's say discrete, but nevertheless, by getting up to words, written words, to express speech, to express an exchange of purpose or idea. So, and this we will have, of course, many examples of that after. The Annunciation, if you go now to Quebec art, or to, I thought first of showing you this sculpture, was a little bit naive and nice. It's in Verchères, near Montreal. We don't know exactly nor by whom it was done and nor when, but it's an annunciation by the theme. You see, you have the angel coming with this pound of peace again, and showing the ray of God, and the Holy Ghost on the top there is represented by a dove. This is quite classical. And then the Virgin making a double gesture of, she's a little bit afraid and also of acceptation. You have both. Here, nothing is written. The part was sculpted, were in 3 dimensions, are the Virgin, the angel, and the dove, and the rest is painted in trompe-l'œil, a little bit like in 3 dimensions. But nevertheless, you are very close to the theme of the Annunciation, as I was describing before. And look, you can make a parallel of this sculpture with a painting. Alessandro Allori is not certainly the conscious source of the sculpture here. The sculptor is probably Louis Quevillon. He's a sculptor, was a kind of manufacturer of sculpture in wood like this in the 19th century, before that plasters and bronze and all that invade the churches in Quebec. But let's see, I'm not sure, but it's a little bit the same thing, meaning that there you have a tradition so big that you find out suddenly a kind of convergence, let's say, in the gesture of the virgins are exactly the same here, and also at the position of the angel, with also holding flowers in his hand, and this cloud in the middle there will be equivalent to the ray coming from the dove. You see that you have a correspondence there because the theme have been repeated so often and in so many ways that finally you can have this convergence. So I don't speak of the influence of Allori that probably Monsieur Quevillon never heard of on him, but rather a kind of conversion of theme because this is the way to represent the Annunciation since years and years by so many artists. The things, sometimes you do have in sculpture like that to represent angels, and this one it's now at the National Musée National des Beaux-Arts in Quebec City, but come from a church who was called L'Ange Gardien, a little village near Quebec. If you go toward east, you will find this village. And then there was 4 big angels like this in the church. And you can distinguish them by what is written on them. Say, for instance, this one, I put you on the side, the kind of detail, in a large detail, and you see Ave Maria. So this is the salutation, of course, of the angel coming to the Virgin to tell her that she's pregnant and everything. So Ave Maria is typical of Gabriel. It can be only the Gabriel angel. So it's a way to identify him by few words, like the essence of what is said. You have examples in which there are more words than that. Indeed, it's good that we have them because otherwise we will not know exactly what's happening. It's what we call an ex voto. And you know what it is? It's a kind of little picture, habitually, promised by people who have been in big trouble, like he seems to be in the middle of the river there, and being threatened by death, by drowning or something. So it's promised that if we are saved, we will pay for a little painting and we'll deposit it in the sanctuary, let's say in Saint-Anne-de-Beaupré. Saint-Anne-de-Beaupré is near Quebec, a little bit further. And so on the top, you have a caption there who tell you all the circumstances of this ex voto. So it's written ex voto of GBT Auclair, Louis Bouvier, Martha Feuilletot, the 3 of them saved, and then Maria Chamard, 21 years old, Marguerite Champagne, 20 years old and 1 day. My God, it was probably her birthday party, and it finished badly. Both drowned on June 17, 2 o'clock in the morning. For God's sake, what they were doing in the middle of the river at 2 o'clock in the morning. See? It was really running after trouble, but anyway. All of them in this terrible situation, praying Saint Anne to save them. This is the important point, of course. They are in terrible mess. 2 of them will die in this. You notice that the boys there are not very gallant. They are sitting comfortably on the upside the river's canoe. One charitably take the oar for one of the girls, and she was saved, but the 2 others, with their heavy equipment of the time, and they have a little hat and they have many layers of clothes, were hopeless. They drowned. And so the boys, one is a little bourgeois on the left, he's better dressed, and the other is a little peasant who's nicer a little bit, but the boys are not great there. They should be, instead of Saint Anne should have given them a little spank in the tachat. But anyway, so you see, this is kind of a naive ex voto, of course, done probably by, we don't know, a painter that was commissioned for that. So the three who have been saved are supposed to have paid that and then bring this little picture, it's not big, to the sanctuary of Saint-Anne-de-Beaupré in thanking, from, why ex voto? From a vow that he made that he will do it, and thanking Saint Anne or whoever the saint. And Saint Anne is represented, of course, in the cloud above the scene there. Very often she's with a book because she's supposed to be represented teaching the Virgin how to read. But there probably you have just this idea of an older lady being in among clouds like this and suspended in midair above the scene. And on each side of this, you have little churches or allusion to maybe Beaumont on one side and Lévis on the other side. Anyways, some of the landscape of Quebec, of the region of Quebec. Okay, so then you see the need of words in a picture like that, because if we don't have this, we don't have the name of the people who give the ex voto, we don't have the circumstances of their trouble, and so this need was almost like in a comic strip. So you make a box and you write in it whatever happened. Well, this is for my example, let's say in Canadian painting, ancient of religious theme. But you do have also the same type of presentation when the subject is not religious. And I thought of presenting to you a map, an old map. You will say, well, this is not a work of art, but in fact, map of the 16th century representing America in particular, or even other regions of the world, are very often very illuminated, like we say, with a lot of pictures, a lot of little vignettes. And as such, they are interesting, let's say, almost like painting. And there, they will have the same problem. You see, how do you express what we see? And here, for instance, it's a representation of Canada done by this Pierre de Cellier. Pierre de Cellier was a priest, but he was teaching navigation in Dieppe in France. He never came to Canada, of course, and well, you will see that some of the elements there are very fantasist, and they are not depicted from experience, you know. It's just things that he knows and he thinks is there. The funny thing, if you look carefully, Labrador is in the bottom of the map, Terre de Labrador, and Florida will be on the top, as if it's completely reversed. But because of that, we can read Mer d'Espagne, Mer de France, Canada, just above the big square where you have writing, you have the word Canada in gold and things. And so, presented like this, you could read it. In fact, this is a detail from a world map. And when you see the detail in the whole context of the map, because this is how it is, in fact, at the British Library, you see in the upper left corner the detail I show you, but now presented as it should. Florida is down, and if you go even further down, you will have the shape of South America, more or less like we have it today. In front of it, you see Africa. You see a kind of red streak of paint in the middle there. It says, well, maybe you just pour it. No, it's the Red Sea. So the Red Sea have to be red, after all. I've seen the Red Sea. I guarantee you it's not red. It's the most bluest sea I've never seen. Anyway, but and then you have Europe, and finally, on the right side, Asia and things. So it's a kind of big mapmonde or world map, but what you have to understand, it is the way it was displayed. It was actually rolled in a box and then put on a table and then opened like that and put flat on the table, so that all the king and the court could be around the table, so everybody have something to read. The people on the top, on this part there, could read it because the writing was reversed, and the people on the other side could read also something, because then from the south, from let's say the equator to the south, it is it can be read normally, and on the top, on the contrary, it's reversed. So that's why when I wanted to show it to you, I have to reverse it. Otherwise, you would not have been able to read anything on it. Okay, now what I want to stress, it is these little, you see this little square with a golden frame in which there are things written there, and above them you have little scenes who are more elaborated. And there you will see again the relationship between what is written and what is depicted is very clear, very interesting. For instance, you have this, where it's called, you have the square, if you want, with the golden frame, and above it you see the word pygmeos, and of course for pygmies. And if you read the text there, you will see that he describes exactly what we are shown. I read it to you, you see. Here is the depiction of a small people named the pygmies measuring 1 cubit. Well, this is really small. 1 cubit is about this size. And he had, at 3 years old, they give birth, and at 6 they die. Okay, well, if you start at 3 years old to give birth to children, you may end up at 6, indeed. Having no shame, no justice, nor honesty, they are said to be brutes rather than men. It is believed that they are endlessly at war with cranes. That's explained why you have these birds there. And they have at war with them, and they are about the same size, of course. Even the crane could be a bit bigger. And you see, below the cranes, you have, maybe you notice, you have these kind of, it looks like beehives a little bit. Okay, this is the house of pygmies. Of course, it has to be small like them. And maybe some of you have noticed you have a unicorn there too, standing near the word pygmeos. You have why a unicorn in that region of the world? Because unicorn is supposed to be in Asia. And so when the first discoverer came here, let's say people like Cartier, and the very first one, they are sure they touch Asia. Maybe not completely. For instance, we are told that Columbus had an interpret with him who spoke Arabic and spoke Hebrew, in case we meet these people from Asia, that we will be able to speak with them. And the big surprise, of course, they get with this naked savage, you see, were shouting at them and all this, so they could not understand what went wrong, But and then you keep this idea of India. For instance, I will show you later a manuscript where they speak of l'Inde occidentale, the India of the Occident, opposed to the India of the Orient. So the unicorn actually is a good sign of Asia. That's what you expect to find there. It's full of unicorn there and all this. And if we have not seen them yet, it is because we didn't go further enough, and now he put that there. But you see the little square there allude to this fight between the crane and the pygmies. Why? Because, as you know, cranes immigrate from Africa to Europe and have their eggs and lay their eggs in Europe. So for the African, they never saw the eggs. And so they have to have a myth to explain that. Well, this is, it's very easy to understand. It is the pygmy who steal the eggs all the time. That's why we don't see them. And so probably the legend is from Africa. Where the things to explain, it is the absence of eggs of this crane. In Europe, of course, people could see their nests, and they come in the springtime in Europe, a little bit like our Canada geese. It's the same type of immigration of these birds. But, and so then it is, let's say, an allusion to this legend here in the middle of a map of Canada, meaning that if we are far enough, we should find weird things like that. There is a text of Cartier himself in which he says, I want to bring this Donnacona, the Indian chief, to France in order that he will tell to the King of France what he knows about these countries. And what he knows about this country, he says, for instance, in the land of Saguenay, that's a nice place, in which there is unlimited gold, rubies, and other riches. I think this poor Donnacona was brought in France, wanted to come back, and he says, let me guide you towards Saguenay, you will see what riches you will get there, see? That was, I think, clever, but it didn't work. They keep them there. He died there from tuberculosis. It's this idea of transporting these people in Europe like this, like all of them did, all the explorers, one after the other, did that all the time, was very vicious and bad. It was like almost to be sure that they will die. He says, there is men there in Saguenay, as white as in France. Okay, so of course, all this is invention. And apparel in woolen clothes. If they have wool, that means they have sheep. They know how to weave things, and so maybe they are much more cultivated than we people that you find near Quebec and the Iroquois or whatever these people were. Further, he told of having seen other countries where the men do not eat and have no fondment. Wait, if you don't eat, you don't need this. Huh? The digestion is done, I don't know how. And do not digest, he says, exactly. Moreover, he told of having been in another country of Pygmalians, I'll say our pygmies, and other countries where the people have only one leg. They jump like this. It's fatigant, but they go like this. And other marvels lengthy to recount. The said Lord is an ancient man and never cease going through countries after knowledge, as well by rivers and streams as by land. So this Cartier, I think he takes it very seriously. He says, this guy are telling us incredible stories that should be checked, you know. This is the time where the motto is experientia is magister rerum. And the experience make you the landlord or the controller of the things. Information is power, if you want. And so this is one. The other scene, I had one example of this pygmy fighting against a crane, but to show that, again, it's a very old story. So since you have it in mosaic of Roman time, and you find it already in Homer, for instance, in the Iliad, comparing the Trojan and the Greeks, like the Pygmies and the cranes fighting together for getting the city of Troy. Okay, and after, you have another of these square, and then it's associated to a portrait of a man who seems to count on his fingers, in front of whom you have maybe 5 wild people that are making gesture also. It's hard to understand exactly what it is. You have some historian that thought this was a portrait of Jacques Cartier. But it's not sure at all. He seems to have the clothing that you expect from a merchant at the time, so with this kind of turban on his head, and the fact that he counts on his finger. So maybe what he wants to express it is that people trying to make commerce with these wild people there. But as you will see written here, under the scene, the commerce was not very successful. He said, here is the representation of few countries discovered since a while, and at the expense of King of France, Francis I. I always said the map is for Francis I. These maps were not brought on boats. They were for the king to have in his collection. The maps on boats are very different, are more technical than that. That's why it's so lavishly illustrated, because you have to, many of these nobles and kings were completely ignorant of writing, so they could not read. So you give them little pictures to entertain them. Situated in the west at more than 50 degrees of latitude, to these countries was sent by the aforementioned king, honest and clever gentleman, Mr. de Roberval. Yeah, for the time, it's not Cartier who's important, it's Roberval, because he's a noble, and Cartier is just a pilot, so they don't mention it with the same glory. With a substantial group of good people, but also with a group of criminals to settle in that country. So make your choice. Are you a descendant of one or the other? Discovered at first by the pilot Jacques Cartier from Saint-Malo. And since it has been impossible to do business with the people of the said country, being very poor, cold, and unprofitable, our people returned to France, hoping to go back when it will please the king. Okay? Alors, so that's what the scene express, I think. There's no way to make commerce with that. They have nothing to sell, and they don't know very often they will even say they don't know how to speak, meaning that their language doesn't exist even. It's like, you know the origin of the word barbarian, yeah. Barbaroi in Greek means somebody who makes sounds, no sense. So it's exactly that. So you see, in that map, finally, this little square with the writing give the key to the right interpretation of the scene. Because it's always the same problem. Painting is nonverbal, it's mute. So to make it speak, you need words. You need to add words. Another example of these maps is one of my favorites. This one, because really, you will see they go very far. So it's a wall map of the two America. I think you recognize them very well. You have North America on the top of the map, and then South America lower. And you see that in the corner, you have little scenes who have been engraved. Of course, it's an engraving, this thing. It's not a drawing, let's say, or a painting like the other one. The Pierre de Solier map that I showed you just before is unique. This one, we have few copies, depending in different collection. We have one in the Public Archives of Canada, and that's one I use. And so in each corner, you have engraving of scenes that are supposed to be typical of, let's say, of Canada, or of South America, depending where it is situated. I give you a close-up of the scene on the upper left corner. And it's wonderful because you recognize more or less the Niagara Falls in the back. And then in the foreground, you have a lot of beavers. I hope they don't try to stop Niagara Falls because this will be a real problem. But they are building a dam there. Yeah? And they have many of them. They are, I don't know, maybe 100. Because this dam, when the first discoverer came and see this beaver dam, it's so big, and sometimes it really stops a lot of water. They thought that it's impossible that only 2 or 3 beavers can do that. There must be a group, you know, there must be a bunch of them. And here he suggests more. You have on the left down, you have captions there with letters that correspond to letters who are on each beaver, and he tells you which one, what they are doing. Not only they are many, but they are well organized, and each one have a specific task. you understand why it's my favorite, this one. Anyway, so you have, with A, he says, these are the lumberjack. They cut the wood. And whatever the size of them, they gnaw on this, and then this big tree falls, and he says it's the main structure of the dam, of the beaver. And then you have in B, the carpenter who cut the piece of wood in little section. Yeah? And finally, in C, you have the bearer of wood. So you have the one who cut it, the one who slice it in pieces, and then you have one who will transport it on the side to make the dam. So it's well organized. Huh? Each, like we say the corps de métier, huh? So that will, no conflict. Alors, after, it's not enough because they were convinced that the beaver was using also a mortar. Because if you have only these sticks in the water, it will not stop anything. So they says they have to make mortar. So that's what he showed you on D. You have a bunch of them. And when it finished, when they get it with clay or whatever it was, they put it on the tail of one of their guys, and he transports it like this on the side. Huh? He become, if you want, a kind of wheelbarrow himself. It's wonderful. They go with their tails with this stuff. There's one lying down in the bottom of the picture I will tell you more about him a little bit later. Here you see them transporting the mortar. So you have a bunch who transport the sticks, and then others come with a mortar like this. Of course, all this is pure fantasy. But what you understand there, slowly, it is this idea of a well-organized society. If your first principle it is that such a big dam cannot be done without a group of beavers, let's say, they have to be organized. And if they have to organize, they are probably also organized in a kind of hierarchy. And so then, subreptiously, in a way, there's a politics message here. The politic message is that monarchy is better than anything else. If you had republic there, it would be a mess, you see, because nobody will understand what to do, and everybody will want to do the same thing. Now, if you have a very well-organized society in which each one do his work, and have above them a king, or someday you will see he's there also, you could have order, and you could have the best of society. Here, you have in H, yeah, my guy who's on the back, look. And this one have another beaver coming to him and looking at him carefully, and in French they call it l'inspecteur des invalides. It means somebody who checks if you are really sick or not. Police, in fact. So this beaver on this back saying, I'm finished, I'm tired and all that. They check him, and he says in the text, he says, pour le remettre en son devoir. If he doesn't do his duty properly, you have policemen who will come and will tell him to, hey, get back on your feet and go. L'inspecteur des invalides. I find it wonderful. And you have also, is it here? No. You have also, yeah, in F, I think you have a beaver who lifts his hand like this a little bit, and if you go to the legend, it's written, he's le commandant. So a commandant, of course, that's exactly what the hierarchy I was speaking about is all about. There is somebody who decides what you do and what to do, and you have the police with him also. If somebody doesn't make his duty, he can check. So you have a kind of an image there of a society who is, in fact, a monarchy. And so politically, these beavers are very useful for the power of the time. They claim the advantages of monarchy. Bon, and then finally they go to the dam, and with their tails they strike the mortar, you see, to make it very square like you see here. And comment ça finit? Ouais, ça finit avec ça. Okay. And so this is again, yeah, there's one also, I forgot to tell you, I find it very nice also. One of the guys who's on his back like this, the legend says, Castor fatigué de la queue pour avoir trop travaillé. Beaver, tired, how do you say that? Incommodé, not well in his tail because he overworked. You know. So, Castor fatigué de la queue pour avoir trop travaillé. So, anyway. So that's, but you see, again, this legend on the side transmits not only a way to read each of the animals there, but also a kind of theory, a kind of political ideology there. Which quite, there is, I don't have example, I don't brought it, but there is indeed one author a little bit later in the time that thought of La République des Castors. And he have trouble because he have to show that they all do the same together. And so he invent the idea that they have a language to solve the problem, because if they can speak together, okay, they can say, okay, do this and I will do that and all that, it will be organized. But he's a Republican, and it's Lahontan. Le Baron de Lahontan was against the monarchy at the time. That's why he lived in America and all that. And his beavers are Republican. Are not monarchists. Okay. Another beautiful example of this, the importance of these captions in old manuscript of, let's say, belonging to really to Canadian art, it is the so-called Codex Canadensis. I show you just a page to give you an idea of what it is. It's page 40, you see on the top there. And what is the Codex Canadensis? It's a manuscript. It's a book of picture, if you want. that have been done probably by a Jesuit priest around 1700. You will see why we can be quite precise about the date. And it's represent the natives and also a little bit of the flora of Canada, and finally also of the fauna. And among his interests, there is the birds, of course, and he made this beautiful page of these birds. The name are a little bit whimsical. C'est l'oiseau jaune, l'oiseau rouge, l'oiseau bleu. He doesn't know them, of course. He never saw these birds in Europe, so he invented their name like this by the color. But sometimes the picture is good enough that ornithologists can recognize what they are. Huh? And so this Louis Nicolas, the author of this Codex Canadensis, was a kind of weird fellow because he's a missionary. So you expect him to convert Indians and to baptize as much people as possible. But apparently what he was doing, it was a naturalist story more than anything else. He's roaming all over the area at the time. We find him in Seven Islands on one end and at the end of the Superior Lake at the other end. So really, he was everywhere. And he took probably notes of all these things that interested him. And in the relation, that means in the text that the Jesuits publish each year in France about their good deeds, you see, in which, of course, you have always mention of how many people were baptized and who become Christian and all that. He's not mentioned much. Louis Nicolas, what we heard, il est parti. Oh, bon, okay, he's somewhere else, you know. And so we were expecting him in Quebec. No, he was suddenly in Seven Islands. Bon, very often, so you feel that this was not a great guy who will end up in sainthood, let's say. But he's a wonderful drawer and painter, and this, I guess, it's a main redeeming feature. And he wanted this manuscript to be given to the king. Of course, like many of these things then end up in the library of the king. And that's why at the beginning, you have 3 pages in which he makes very, I would say, very clear dedication to the king. And the king, of course, is Louis XIV at the time in France. Huh? And for instance, here, you represent, you see a kind of mass on the top, and then a lion upside down. And in the text in between, who have been added after the picture were done, he wrote what he meant by this. Not only the lion is upside down, but also, if you notice, his claws have been cut, and with a little bit blood. And here, that's what he explained, and the text is in between. I read it, translation in English. Royal Mace of France, which has, by the force of its crown, okay, the force of its crown is Louis XIV, of course, overthrown almost all Holland, represented by this overturned lion, which is the coat of arms of Holland. So that's why he put the lion there, because it's a kind of symbol of the Netherlands, if you want. And he says, the claws of the overturned lion seen on this page mark the victories of Louis the Great, before whom all Holland trembles in the wars that the king waged against the Dutch. Okay, so the first page is to assess the power of Louis XIV against Holland. Holland was very close to Spain at the time, so that was for Holland was less important, let's say, than the relation of France with Spain. But to invade our land and to make things with it. So then you turn the page 2, and then you have again one of dedication, but this time you will see why it's interesting. It's a royal crown of France. That's what you see on the top. Supported by 2 globes, and I don't know if you see them, but they are there, the 2 little circles. You have the crown and then 2 little globes or whatever. 2 balls, if you want. 2 columns, and you have the 2 columns after, of the plus ultra. The plus ultra is Louis XIV, of course, which topples the silver tower of Castile. And that's why the towers of Castile are upside down here. But then he have a problem because in 1700, the one who became the king of Spain is a relative of Louis XIV. So then he continued, re-established today. So meaning these towers are upside down here, have been re-established today by the same crown of France in the person of Philip V, son of His Royal Highness, to their apparent and grandson of Louis the Great. Okay, the son of, what he says is of His Royal Highness is Dolphin, is the son of Louis XIV. So it's like the grandson of Louis XIV is now Philip V, and he's the king of Spain. So that's why he reestablished the towers normally. But he did probably his drawing before that. And we know exactly when Philip V was named king of Spain. It is in 1700. And because of that, we think we have the date of the Codex Canadensis. And the third dedication is about Germany this time. So that's why you have eagles there, who are blind by the beautiful sun with Louis XIV, as you can imagine. Again, these dedications that are added to these pictures make them more clear. Otherwise, it's so symbolical, it's so allegorical in a way that we will have difficulty to know exactly what it is. And one of for art historian, we always like that, to have a clue of the date of the work, and so here we can date it perfectly. The problem is that we don't know when Louis Nicolas died, because this funny guy, when he came back to France, and having not a good reputation as a missionary, he wanted to publish this book. He wanted to give it to an engraver, and that he will make a nice publication, but his superior decided no. It's too funny, it's too bizarre and all that. And he was so mad at them that he quit the order of the Jesuit. And at the time, if you quit an order like that, the people lose sight of you. So we don't know where he ended up. He's in France somewhere. He probably become a regular vicar or something like that, because he probably didn't turn a layman like you will have today. But where, in what little parish in France, and when he died, we don't know. And but if it's him who is the author of this, he must have died after 1700, or maybe a little bit later. And okay, and if you now, to conclude, I want to show you a few examples of the same tendency, I think, to use words like this in picture to give them some meaning in much more contemporary art, much closer to us. All my examples were quite ancient, but I begin with this one with a lithograph by Joyce Whelan, which is called O Canada. And this is an extraordinary example, because now you are not using words, really, to suggest speech. You are using the shape of the mouth, singing O Canada. And what happened, it's a lithograph. So Whelan understood what the lithography process is, meaning that what you have basically, it's a stone, in which if you put something greasy on it, if you draw something with a greasy substance, when you will put water above it, the water will be repelled by the grease, and on the contrary, the grease will stay as it is, untouched. Then when you use an ink on this in a roller, let's say to prepare your print, the ink could be greasy also, so it will not go where water is, but it will go where you have grease. And Whelan thought, says, my lipstick is greasy enough. I says, I should use that too. So she kissed literally, oh, like this, slowly. And so what you see, it's her lips pronouncing the word of the national anthem, O Canada. Bon. This is, I would say, this is exceptional, because then you have a representation of the voice, not of speech. of the voice itself, of the sounds, I would say. The only parallel I could find of that, it is some example of what we call chronophotography. So at the beginning, before you have film even, there was experiment done by Mary and by this man, Demeny here, of photographing in very high speed anything that moves. And Demeny thought that he could help children who were mute and deaf to be able to recognize words by reading lips. So he photographed himself here, maybe the question of few seconds. What you see, all these pictures were done very fast, saying, "Vive la France!" And so when you know that, you look at his face and you will say, "Vive la France!" Really, we can almost read it. In fact, with the poor kids of deaf and mute, they could not use that much, and finally it stayed like this. But it's, again, an example of trying to express not only speech, but voice also, through voice. But this is rare. This is, you don't find many examples of that. Even in the work of Whelan, you have the regular way to use words like reason over passion. You know, it's a quotation of Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Apparently, he had this work in his, not in his office, but in his home, where the Prime Minister was. And there's a famous scene in which he was shouting at his wife until they were fighting and all that. And he took this big piece of, it's like a quilt, in fact, and remove it from the wall and tear it a little bit. He was so enraged. And God bless him now, his son have been elected. Anyway, the reason over passion was repaired after by Joyce Whelan and all that, and put back in the Prime Minister house. And she made also, of course, the opposite, passion over reason. And even this one, if you look at it, well, first of all, it's a quilt, kind of typically, I would say, woman type of work. And then also the little art and all this. It's, of course, ironical. She doesn't want to defend that reason is always better than passion. And especially that she did exactly the opposite. But then we are more close to the other example I gave you, in which the meaning of the words are the key to the painting. Another artist who have done this also is Charles Gagnon. I knew him. He deceased, unfortunately, but we were not parent, let's say. The Gagnon is like the sand of the sea. You know, there's a Tremblay and Gagnon. You have as much as Smith elsewhere. And so we were not related, but I knew him. We were at the same college and all that. And Gagnon have been to United States a long time, and he was certainly interested by more conceptual approach to art. So he many of his work use words like this. And first of all, you think the word is like a title a little bit. But then you reflect that the title normally is on a little label glued on the wall near the painting and not in it. So then it's as if you want to blur this idea of a title and the painting, as if you were in a kind of no man's land between both. And I think this is interesting because also it describes very often the type of space we are looking at. Like here, this kind of, it's not a picture, it's really like a valise in a way. It can be closed. You see the hinges in the middle, called circa. Alors, circa means, of course, you could look around or you could look inside. And in the top, let's say what seems more interesting is what is inside. And in the bottom, what is more interesting is what is around. So as if you, by the very fact that the word circa is not just a title near the painting, but inside of the painting, it makes you see it differently. You may realize suddenly that there is more than what you see. The same thing here, continuum. Very often also, Charles Gagnon lived enough in the United States to be interested to have words that will work in both languages. Like circa, of course, it works in French and in English, it's in Latin. And continuum, the same thing. It's a kind of word that can be used in both. So continuum may represent, let's say, we speak in science, for instance, the continuum between space and time. But here, it is the suggestion, I would say, more between, let's see, the reality as it is and what we do with it when we read form in it. It is as if you were confronted to the continuum of reality before you begin to make concept and could isolate this thing from that thing. And then you end up with a kind of endless manifestation of maybe of energy or whatever that could continue on the left, on the right, on the top, and the bottom, and with a continuum, but showing, let's say, the world before we begin to rationalize it and to divide it in things. How this is a table, this is a chair, this is, say, as if you see it a little bit like the scientists see the atoms, or whatever there is. It's all this energy that is roaming around us. And so it's painted with kind of fast brush and all that. But again, the suggestion by the title or by the word written on it make you suddenly enter in different layers of signification. Fragment, okay, you realize that what we see on the painting is just a fragment of a huge thing that, of course, is not painted, but suggested. If you see on the top, you have a little change of color, and the same in the bottom, and as if what we see, we are given to see is just a fragment of a more brown type of picture. Echo, the echo, then it is an attempt to reach sounds also. Because words, of course, like we saw with the Whelan work, is not only something that you can read and depict, but it's also eventually a sound, and as if the painting will be an echo of some sounds that we have here. So each time Gagnon works on this kind of complex relationship you see of words with painting, would be a title, it could be an element of the painting, and also a way to read the painting and the suggestion of space inside of the painting. Third and last example with Robert Racine. Robert Racine has this incredible project of to make visible the French language. We mean everything, the dictionary. For instance, this work here presents 5 pages of a dictionary. It's called Le Petit Robert. It's like the most common dictionary in French, let's say. And on each pages, he have removed what you see in darker, a little bit like this. You have removed the words of which we have the definition after. In the dictionary, you have the word and then a little definition. So all the words have disappeared. But he cut this with the X-Acto, so it's removed. And then he glued the page on a mirror. The dictionary is the mirror of the language. So when you look at this picture, you see yourself in it also, because all these little windows make a reflection of you. And then more than that, many of these words there are underlined or change of colors and things like that. In this work, here, the page miroir exposition, he find 23 pages in the dictionary where the word exposition appear. So then when you begin to think of this, it's completely crazy. That guys read the dictionary to find 23 times where the word exposition is printed. I'll show you a little bit more close. You will see it. Like here, the title, page miroir, Y2126Z. It is because we are at the end of the dictionary. I checked it. Everybody has Le Petit Robert in his library. And the 2126 is the page number. It is the last page of the dictionary in which You finish the Y and you begin the Z and maybe one more page and that's it. So then the title is there. And then you see maybe a little bit better all the pieces were cut and I have even a close-up of this in which, okay, what this looks like beige or gris are in fact words that have been removed from the pages, and what you see is more or less a reflection, the mirror. Then you realize that some of the word here are underlined, like la here, and ici, fa, re, and then when you put them all together, you get the note of the scale, say do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, in French. So again, he underlined all, and then he played that. I've been at a concert of Robert Racine on a piano, and he says, I will play the dictionary. And he goes with do, fa, re, fa, according to this word that he finds. And there's an obsessive quality to Robert Racine's work that is amazing. See, at the beginning, you say, well, it's not very pretty and all that, but the more you enter in this process and the way he works, it's amazing. And to finish, I think I cannot have a better example. Unfortunately, my photo is taken from a catalog, but this is a work that he exhibited at the Musée d'Art Contemporain a few years ago, in which it's called Le Terrain du Dictionnaire. What it is each mention in the dictionary of a word with its definition have been cut and glued on a little piece of cardboard, and then with a needle put in this big structure that you see here. So all the words of the dictionary should be there. Even, I remember, at the Musée d'Art Contemporain, you have binoculars to look if you want to check if your a word is there somewhere far. It will be, and his dream it is to make le parc du dictionnaire. See? That would be a maquette. But normally we will have somewhere, maybe in Parc La Fontaine or something, a huge piece of land in which all these little definitions will be there. And we will have a kind of realization of the language, the dictionary being the reflection of all the language, and then you will have it visually instead of just phonetically. So anyway, these are only 3 examples of modern artists dealing with this type of themes. But you see, it fascinates, finally, both people of the past and the people of much closer to us, because all these are, Robert Racine is still living, how to go beyond this limit of words, and each one, of speech, I mean, each one find his way, and so you have, finally, maybe the challenge was met. Okay, this is our first theme. Next time, we will deal with movement. For the same reason, you will see it's a challenge also for painter, and how they try to express movement in their works. Alors, that's what we'll see next Wednesday. Thank you.